Today's video is going to be a real estate market recap for Portland Metro 2024. At the time I'm doing this video, it is right around mid-December. So if you're looking to get an idea of what the heck happened this year in real estate stats that are edible, stick around because we're getting after it right now. I'm Ann Stewart. I'm a principal broker for over 20 years in the Portland metro area, born and raised, haven't left, love this place. And if you have not subscribed yet, you're missing out on our weekly content that we put out every single week. So hit the subscribe button, tap that notification bell, and better yet, if you are making a move to the Portland metro area, all of our contact information is listed below. We would love to hear from you. We get reach outs all the time, just got a couple this week, and we would love to help you make the move to the Portland metro area. All right, I like to do my real estate market updates in as edible format as I possibly can. I don't like to barrage you with a ton of data and charts, and I've seen other brokers do that, and to be honest with you, I fall asleep very fast. So I'm going to give you a combination of stats that are edible, as well as what I have been seeing in this marketplace over the last 12 months. As I mentioned, at the time I'm doing this video, it is December of 2024. So I've had a whole year of experience in the real estate market to share with you what we're seeing and also kind of break it down with some data that's a little bit interesting. It has been a weird year. We've kind of used that terminology now for a while because it hasn't really acted the way we expected it to. Now, if you've been watching the real estate market and you've heard from the feds, you were all expecting a lot more interest rate reductions, weren't you? We were promised 7 rate reductions this year. We only got about 3. And every time the feds kind of came out and said, don't worry, interest rates are coming down, or the elections, we're going to definitely see a trend downward, it actually kind of did the opposite. So that was something we didn't predict. I have been in this business for a very long time. I'm dating myself, but 23, almost 24 years. And every time we've had an election, with the exception of 2008, we have seen interest rates go down pretty significantly right before elections. And they do that for obvious reasons. They're trying to get people to buy, incentivize them to get off the distraction train and go out there and buy a house. Well, this year was really odd. It didn't quite do that. Most of the interest rate reduction was kind of baked in, meaning they predicted that ahead of schedule. And so mortgage rates came down a little bit or got adjusted just a hair, during or before the run up. But we did think we were going to see it kind of come down quite a bit because they were telling us things are looking really peachy and good and the market's doing well and all those things. Anyway, it was what it was. And one thing I want to share with you is that we are everything that happens in the marketplace, whether it speeds up, slows down, or just kind of remains neutral, is all because of interest rates. For as long as I've been doing this, the interest rates dramatically affect the market. Doesn't mean we stop selling when they go up, but it means the cadence slows way down. And houses tend to sit longer. And the buyers, you guys, tend to go, God, my payment is high, the prices are high. And a lot of times what we saw this year was buyers were kind of waiting it out. They were sitting on the fence. They were like, well, wait a minute, they've promised us these low interest rates, so I'm going to hang back for a little bit and see if those come down. In fact, many buyers' strategy at the back half of this year was to wait right before the elections because everybody assumed that at least before the elections, we were going to have a pretty big drop in interest rates. I even had sellers that were waiting to get on the market just for that. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. And we kind of saw the market get a little bit like, I thought we were going to have, a little more affordability here leading up to elections. Well, now that election's over, what the heck happened? Well, we saw buyers start to crawl out of the woodworks. In fact, during Thanksgiving weekend, it was kind of like the faucet turned on again. Now, we're not talking a spray nozzle. We're talking like a drippity drip down to a drizzle or up to a drizzle. The phone started ringing again. Buyers were like, all right, it is what it is. The excitement's over. We're ready to go buy something. What do you got? And, we saw buyers still having the same reactions, which is this inventory situation hasn't drastically improved. But let's kind of go back to interest rates before we, start talking about inventory in general. Where were the interest rates this year? So I pulled up some data and I put it on the screen here so you can kind of follow along. And it was like, where was the interest rates on average? Now, keep in mind, everybody's situation is different. Just, it's not a one size fits all. If you have really great credit, you get a better interest rate. If you have challenging financing or anything in your financial situation, it can affect your interest rate. But in general and on average is what we're talking about. So I'm finding that the interest rates were in general around 6.5 to 6.75% on average throughout the year, but we did have some high points. I actually saw clients getting quoted around as high as 7.5 in the springtime and parts of the summertime. So it was kind of volatile with interest rates at one point. So when we talk about averages, we're not talking about everybody's situation, but on average, we saw 6.5%. They bumped up to around 7% a lot of this year. When we get over 7%, by the way, we start to see the market respond a lot. In fact, when this time last year, literally, we were bumping up against 8% interest rates and the market was just really, really quiet. Luckily, we did not see that happen this year. The highest I saw was 7.5, but we were even right around that 7.25 for quite some time throughout this year. And it was kind of fluctuating a lot this year. There was no necessarily rhyme or reason why sometimes it was higher when we were waiting for low interest rates or expecting them. And that really played into a lot of either how buyers chose to get into the market and buy, and how they negotiated. So this was the year where everything seemed a little more expensive. It was a little more slower. And so buyers had a little more say and leverage in the situation. And I want to talk about the tale of two markets. Number one, there is always the type of inventory that when it hits the market, it sells quickly. So always understand that if you're a buyer and you're looking for something and you haven't found it and something hits the market and it's checking a lot of your boxes, it's in great condition, good location, priced in the realm of reason, chances are it's not going to sit there for very long, no matter what the interest rates were doing. But that market was probably closer to 10 to 15% of inventory that hit. The rest of the inventory that hit this year was really lagging. I mean, we saw a ton of price reductions at different times of this year. And we saw a lot more of those lulls in the market. And when I say the lull, that means there's a time in every year where naturally, historically, and seasonally, it just kind of quiets down a little bit throughout the year. Perfectly normal. We see it every year. But when those lulls happen a little prematurely or for longer stretches of time, it's usually indicative of what's also happening with the interest rates in the market. So we saw a longer lull in different parts of the year, seasonality, if you will, than we typically do. So those were the times when buyers could really snatch up some deals or really negotiate on their offers. The longer a house sits on the market, what do you guys ask? Why? Why has it been sitting on the market for so long? You get kind of suspicious, right? You're like, why isn't anybody else buying it? Usually what happens is they start their prices a little too high and then they slowly come down over time. And then right about the time they have their final price reduction, you're still wondering why it's been sitting on the market. And then you end up being able to negotiate a little bit. And then it's going to sell for a lot less than it could have had it started on the market a little more competitively. But we're seeing a lot of sellers still wanting top dollar for their houses. And in some cases, that just doesn't work out for them because of what the market's doing, or maybe their condition isn't matching what the value is, or maybe they're just plainly starting too high with a higher expectation. Either way, we saw a lot of houses sitting on market or having a lot of price reductions. Currently in December, we're seeing a little bit of a uptick in buyer activity because I think we're through the woods for the moment on a lot of things that happened this year. And they want to get ahead of it before the first of the year. So a lot of houses that have been sitting on the market now are kind of getting some attention here and there because the buyers know that when we turn that corner to January, there's a good chance that more buyers come out of the woodworks. Okay, now let's talk about inventory. So I have up on the screen inventory, and let me give you kind of a breakdown of what this means. So you can look at October, November, which was at 3.5 months of inventory and 2.9 months of inventory. So if no other houses came on the market, it would effectively mean that we would, in theory, sell out in 2.9 months, which isn't actually a lot of time. But if you look at the last 2 years prior, this year of 2024, we've had the highest inventory levels we have seen in the Portland Metro in a really, really long time. We've had moments here and there where inventory built up, but we've really been riding in that 1 to 2.5 months of inventory for a long time. And part of that is because we came out of COVID and gobbled up all the inventory. I mean, during COVID, it was multiple offers and craziness and you're, removing contingencies just to buy a house as a buyer. That's no fun. But inventory got down to less than a month. And I'm going to tell you, that's a hard market as a buyer to be in. The interest rates, by the way, were down in that 2.7 to 3.5 range. And when those rates are like that, it's essentially free money and everybody's a buyer, right? So you don't want that market to come back. You truly don't. Yes, we want those interest rates. A lot of people got to lock in at those, but to buy a house in that market and then watch the prices go flying upwards, that's what happens is we kind of gobble up years of equity when the interest rates are that low. So inventory, what does it mean? Well, again, going back to this year, we saw interest rates in the 6.5 to 7.25% range a lot of this year, and it keeps inventory at these higher levels. It also means that some of the inventory is going to just stag. It's just going to sit there. We've seen that. That's why actually when interest rates go higher, we don't have as many buyers. And so the inventory doesn't get gobbled up as fast. And so that same inventory is being accounted for month over month, meaning although our inventory is lower, and if you're a buyer and you're watching the market, you know that there's not a ton of inventory still. I mean, literally there's inventory, but it's just not moving and you don't want it. It's kind of like, crumbs in some cases if it's been sitting there. And so that inventory that's stagnating is going to the next month and causing the inventory to be higher and so on. So a lot of our buyer clients, maybe you looking online, are saying, gosh, I just don't see a lot of inventory hitting the market or any good inventory, or, you kind of see it as it comes on the market and it just doesn't feel like a lot of inventory is hitting. That's not going to change. But what's different about this year versus last year and the year prior is that interest rates are higher. And so we just don't have that, absorption rate of buyers buying the inventory, if that makes sense. So we're seeing the inventory higher. And in a way that's good. It's given you as a buyer more leverage. This is probably one of the first years I've seen buyer have more leverage than ever. You're able to negotiate on the price. You're able to take a minute to think about the house. You're able to go through the home inspection and ask for things more than you have before. Keep in mind, the lower those interest rates go, I know everybody's like they want the low interest rates, but the way that you're able to negotiate in circumstances has also changed. Now, something else that we need to talk about is, have prices gone down? Now, in 2021, the year of absolute insanity, I've been doing this a long time, like I said, and that was one of those years in 2021 where it was bananas. Every house sold that hit the market. There was, 15 buyers for every house. It was crazy. And in that year, we got as high as 564 on average for the average sales price in Portland. We've come back down to 520. And what's interesting is I've been doing some CMAs, which is comparative market analyses for properties, where I kind of go in and do the research and find out like what are the other comparable properties selling for, list to sales ratio, how long have they been sitting there, how many price reductions they've had. And I can tell you, I literally just did one over the weekend, and I think I pulled 22 comparable properties. And of those comparable properties, all but 2 had more than one price reduction before it sold. And that tells me that people are starting a little too high and then working their way down until they get their offer. So it's not uncommon to see houses sitting. So it's just trying to understand, where has that house been on the market? How long has it been? And sometimes it's the opportunity for you as a buyer to go in and negotiate with that seller. Now, some sellers are hitting the market and they're pricing it right and they're in mint condition. And that's really what buyers are trying to buy right now. A lot of buyers don't want to buy something that needs a lot of work, whether it's structural or cosmetic. They're trying to buy a pretty picture because, quite frankly, they don't have a lot of money left over after they buy a house to put into it. And that's kind of the story that's difficult to share with the seller, is that buyers aren't buying your problems. If the roof is old, or if it needs a lot of cosmetic updating, or there's deferred maintenance, the buyers are just passing it because they just, quite frankly, don't have the money to buy. Now, another thing that came into play beyond elections this year was we had changes in the way that real estate agents do business. You might have heard about it, but if you haven't, I'll give you a quick update. Starting August 17th of this year, almost every state in the union had to conduct business differently if you were a real estate broker, meaning we went from having our compensation as buyer's agents pre-negotiated and paid by the seller and advertised in the MLSs, like we've been doing for the better part of 35 years, to being not advertised in the MLS and not pre-negotiated. In fact, it was that we were prohibited as agents to show even one house to a buyer without a signed buyer service agreement and that buyer agreeing to pay our compensation. Now, how has that worked out since the changes? Well, it might surprise you, but in 98% of most cases that I have seen, the sellers are still covering the cost of the buyer's agent. We're now negotiating that at the time that we're writing offers. Doesn't mean it's not negotiable. It doesn't mean it's not working out in different ways, but in most cases, we're still seeing it play out very similarly to how it was before. It's just that we're now negotiating that at the time of the offer. So that was kind of one of those things that before it changed in August, we were just like leading up to it. We were making those changes and starting to act like those changes were in existence. And we were concerned about, would this stall out the market? Would this affect buyers? Buyers are already, barely able to get into housing anyway. But it seems that in a way, the market being the way it is, a lot of sellers are kind of raising their hands to say, oh, I want buyers agents to show my house. I want to pay them. They're willing to do that because they want to get their houses sold, and they understand that, not every buyer out there is going to have the means to cover their agent. So we thought that was going to stall us out. It actually hasn't. It hasn't proven to do that. And we're still watching it as we go forward, but it's kind of almost business as usual in a weird way. But that is one of those things that throughout the year we were kind of getting ready for these big changes in the industry and having to sit down and talk to buyers about what these changes meant, sit down and talk to sellers what these changes meant. And nobody knew how that was going to affect things. But as it turns out, we're about, 90 plus days in and everything's going fine. So that's kind of what we saw. Now, in my experience of this year, we did see a market where it was a slower time. There's a lot of agents that I network with both locally and nationally. And a lot of us are talking about how there are just some listings that aren't even getting showings. They're not even getting, any kind of activity. Then there's some that are. And so we're talking a lot about, well, what does that mean? What are the buyers buying? And really it's coming down to, the demand out there. And because of these interest rates bobbing around and all this uncertainty that happened this year in the economy and elections, it really did affect our market. Now, I'm going to quickly go into what I think some predictions are for 2025. So if you stuck around this long, you get to hear some of my own predictions. And again, who knows what's really going to happen? It's all yet to be seen. But I think interest rates are going to stay in the sixes. I know we all think they're going to drop down with a new president in office, but I tend to think because of inflation always breathing down our back and there's just so much going on, if we were to dip down too low or in the fives, my concern would be that we would see, an increase in pricing that would not be realistic. But who knows? But I think we're going to stay in the sixes. Maybe we'll be in the lower sixes for 2025. I think inventory is going to get absorbed a little bit fast in the first quarter of this next year. I think demand has been pent up. I think we're all kind of ready to get back to normal and at least say, all right, if this is the interest rates we're dealing with, then we will start to see that inventory kind of get gobbled up. And I think we'll have a pretty fast first and second quarter. That's my sense because of just, we have a lot of buyers that are waiting to buy in the new year or to, make that move. I think we're going to see appreciation in a modest format. I think it'll be under 4%, but if you talk to any economist, the average, 4% is a nice and healthy appreciation that's sustainable. So I think we will see some appreciation next year. And I think we're going to see that people are going to feel optimistic next year. This year, people didn't feel optimistic. Buyers felt pessimistic about all kinds of things for all kinds of reasons. There was so much uncertainty happening that I think in 2025, we're not dealing with all the real estate agent changes. We're not dealing with election. We're not dealing with a lot of things. And I think it's just clearing the way for people to finally just say, all right, I want to buy. I want to get out of renting. Renting's getting too expensive. And naturally, people just want to own. So those are my predictions. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll do an update mid-year and give you a sense of, what actually happened. But this is my sense for what I think is going to happen based on what I'm seeing behind the scenes and what we've kind of come through in 2024. I would love to hear your comments if you think I'm way off or if you have comments about what you think is going to happen in 2025. Drop them below. And as always, we're here for you if you want to reach out.